CIP there.
You washed it at 90 degrees, didn't you? Do you use caustic on it? Just to like, that'll get the stains out.
Mine are all fine. I got my Orlando one.
Yeah, but that's all embroidered.
Yeah, so was yours.
The vintage ones are embroidered, but we bought 2 in a shop in the airport.
Oh, like the replica ones?
Yeah, and I got a replica one.
I'm trying to think which one I bought. I used to wear my Looney Tunes.
We bought the Toronto one.
My bugs.
We bought the Toronto.
I got Toronto. Oh, Raptors one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's an old school. Throwback.
You ready?
We on? We in, yeah.
Done.
Yeah.
I don't know, are we on?
Yeah, we're on.
We on?
Yeah, I just want to get my trainers in. Fresh from China, honestly. Back in November. We're good. Right. So welcome everyone. As you can see, we're not in the brewery. But what we got behind, just firstly, sorry, I'm Brad. I'm the one Gaz always says, Brad. And if you thought I didn't exist, I'm Brad. So I'm Gaz's business partner, co-founder, CEO of Tiny Rebel. So this is our first ever backstage virtual brewery tour. So we're going to take you from literally start to finish, all the way through, and show you every part of the brewery that we can. It won't just be us two. We got a few of the other guys in there as well. So firstly, do you want to introduce yourself? Because there might be a few new ones on there that don't know you.
Yeah. I'm Gaz. I'm the one who always says, to be fair.
I'll have a drink now.
As Brad said, I'm one of the co-founders. Me and Brad are mates. I've been for what, 12?
Brother-in-laws.
15 years, yeah. And yeah, homebrewing a few years ago, working together, engineering, set up a business while working with someone else.
It's like a love story.
And yeah, that's me. You're probably bored of me by now, so that's why I wrote Brad into it. Yeah.
Face for radio, mate. He's the better looking one.
Oh, yeah.
So behind us we got so this year we were due to do a big expansion of the brewery. So this is a site that we we bought the building. There was a building on there and we knocked it down probably around 12 months ago. So what we were you may have seen a few pictures that we put up on social. So this was going to be a 30,000 square foot warehouse, new office block, to form part of our expansion from the brewery that we're going to walk over to now, mainly because we're just running out of space. We built the brewery that you're going to go and see now about 2 years ago. Back in, we moved in January 2017.
Yeah, about 2.5 years ago now, I think.
2.5?
Yeah.
And we thought it would last us around 10 years before we had to do anything else. And lo and behold, yeah, a year in, we were like, crap, we need more space. And we bought this site. We had to secure something. And luckily this site was free. We bought it and the rest is sort of history. But this is going to be parked up just for the moment, just with what's going on. I think it's probably going to set us back a year or two, potentially, depending on how this sort of corona goes, but I don't want to dwell on that too much. So let's talk positive stuff. And should we go over and drink some beer?
Let's go.
And go see the brewery. Let's do this.
Any questions, Mo? No?
So it's always like this in Wales, especially Newport. We always get this sort of weather. We got our own little climate going. Just wait while we cross the road. So firstly, thank you for joining us. I hope you've all got your packs. So this is going to start. Where are you going? Get over here. Oh, trainers.
Nice kicks.
Nice kicks. Like that. Only Jordans. Only Jordans. So, Gaz, do you want to talk to us about the silos?
Yeah, so the first thing, these 3 tanks there, anybody know what we're keeping them? Have a few guesses first. We get lots of different things. They're probably the most Instagrammed, I'd say, thing. When people come to the brewery, they're always taking photos of those. Obviously, they're three of our biggest sort of brands there. What they actually are, there's no beer in there. We don't keep anything like that. No humans or anything. It's all it's all our malt. So the base ingredient in beer is malt. So, and that is probably the largest quantity thing that we use. So each of those is full of malt. The first 2 is full of pale malt. We use a British malt, very low in colour. It's not too dark because we'd like our beers to be a little bit more lighter than your standard pale malt. And the third one in the Stay Puffed, we hold our Pilsner malt. So for our Lazy Boy Lager, the malt again is a little bit lighter and a little bit crisper and lower in flavour. That is held in there. They probably hold around 30 tonnes each. So 30 tonnes probably equates to, each vessel probably equates, I'd say, to around 40 brews. So probably about 2 weeks worth of brews in each vessel. And what happens, we get a big tanker that'll turn up, it'll come in the yard, swing around, and it'll blow up all the malt through those, you'll see the galvanized steel pipes. They'll blow it all up into the top where we'll replenish all that stock. So it's just an efficient way rather than doing it in 25 kg bags like Brad probably used to remember lifting.
Yeah, when you let me.
What happens behind the silos?
Can't say.
Saw a few staff members getting a bit of hanky-panky around the back of there, you know what I'm saying?
So we got the ice cream van as well. That's been with us, I think, from the start, isn't it, the ice cream van?
So ice cream, yeah, legendary. This is, so it's a 1950s Bedford. So it's, we bought it probably a year into opening Tiny Rebel in 2012. So it's that old, and when we bought it, it was running quite all right actually. It's got sort of 3 gears. It'll go a max around 30 mile an hour. And out of both of the whips, this is probably our favourite. So this is the luxury. This is the more the daytime whip. We got the Sprinter. It's quite new, 68 plate. But yeah, the Bedford is. If you've been to a beer festival, we've been there. You've probably seen it.
It's like driving a tank. No one wants to drive it because it's like driving a tank. There's no power.
Literally, you stop at traffic lights, it'll break down. You're pushing it, but it's we'll never get rid of it. It's probably the best thing.
She's great.
We just wish we could do more with it. At the moment, it's become a bit of storage. Unfortunately.
So one of the main things we've done when we built the brewery, obviously, there's the production side, that's one half of the building, and then there's the front part is all the front of house stuff, so offices, we'll go around that a bit later, staff rooms, and all the bar and restaurant area, which we put a huge amount of effort into, because we wanted that sort of, that welcoming sort of thing where people could come, relax, real family vibe, dogs, kids, you name it. So one of the things we always wanted to do was plant hops as well, because obviously hops is a key ingredient to what we use. And as you can see, these hops now, all this will just be full of hops in about 2 months' time. They've just started to grow now. Got in, and they'll literally be covered. So that's pretty cool, and it just gives something a little bit different. And you know, people can come and pick a few off and smell them, and actually look and see what they look like before we use them. We've never used these ones in a, but
We're building it up.
yeah,
Trying to build up.
We get really good harvests every year, so it's great.
Yeah, like Gaz says, a big part of what we wanted to do here was create this sort of experience, really. And Wales, Newport isn't known for sun, but we wanted this epic sort of patio where you could look out just over the valley. And then on a night like this, you got an amazing view. You can sort of sit here all night, have a beer. It's nothing better than this.
That's the valleys.
That's where Gaz is from.
Is that your valley? Yeah, that's my valley.
That's your Blackwood Valley.
I thought they named the valley after you, didn't they?
No, not yet.
Gaz's Valley. Oh, that was something else.
Oh, no, that's how green is my valley. So,
We're gonna jump into a beer.
yeah. So one of the first
Do
is
you want to talk through the running order for the beer, so everyone can get their beers lined up, ready?
yeah, of course. So what we'll do, we'll start with Clwb Tropica. Yourself.
How often do you call it Tropicana?
I haven't yet.
Every day.
No, it's just the thing. So we'll start with this one. So crack on and open this one up, guys. Hopefully you've tried it before. If not, crack on and let us know what you think. We won't go too much in about the flavours and things like that because it's not really a beer tasting. It's just a match of what we're going to do today. We'll go through this one first, then we'll go into the brewery where we'll go to the mash tuns and the brewing, and then we'll try Stay Puffed at the mash tuns. We'll try the wort as well there, and we'll go on into cellaring and the fermenters where we'll try the framboesi. Then we'll go on into packaging where we'll have the peaches and cream, and then finish off at our canning line with the with Kutch, and we'll explain a little bit about that. So yeah.
Crack open your beer. So the main inspiration for this was we wanted to try and recreate lilt. I think that's the easiest way to put it, is that. And when me and Gaz, you know, sat in the office back at the old brewery, our old brewery was probably the size of this patio area. You know, that was sort of some of the sort of ideas that we knock around. And it was really the first probably fruit beer that we ever really made on scale. We never meant to make it on scale. It was a one-off beer at start. So we started it, then we brewed it probably February 2014, 2015 maybe. We did one batch of it, and we ended up brewing it then all year round. The year after, it came into our core range, and now it's our biggest selling beer. So it's, you know, it's one you can probably get in most places when pubs are open, we like to think. And now it's we've got a few listings now coming up in supermarkets, which I hope you'll be happy about. We certainly are, especially in sort of what's going on at the moment. So to everyone, cheers. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, guys.
I haven't had a beer with you for ages now.
I know. Cheers.
Don't see Gaz anymore. Self-isolation.
So I think one of these, because this beer, obviously the business started 10 years ago, and it kind of started in a garage. And when me and Brad were working together, engineering, and we were both into beer. We used to travel for miles and miles to find certain beers and
day trips to London.
Yeah.
Go down to Cheddar.
Yeah.
You know, trip down Cheddar.
Yeah, and this was sort of 10 years ago. Yeah, 10, 12 years ago. And beer's changed a lot. Craft beer's changed huge. And this wasn't, obviously, we used to make different beers. We used to have Urban IPA, which was one of our flagship brands. And then as time went on and, you know, tastes were changing and people wanted more fruity beers, we obviously went on to this. But it was surely all influence from the beginning, wasn't it? That, you know, sort of 10 years ago. And
yeah, way back then, definitely. And yeah, I think like what Gaz said is I think what we've done is evolved quite well. You know, we still drink beers from when we first started, Fubar, Urban IPA, and it's exactly the same recipes when we brew it, but it tastes a lot different, and it's all based around your taste profile. You know, there's more hops in beer now, so you expect more, and it's people think recipes change, but they don't, especially not ours anyway.
No, it's all on people's taste buds. I mean, what we were drinking 12 years ago, 10 years ago even, completely different to what we're drinking now. Maybe the pale ales are the same, but you know, IPAs have become a lot more fruitier and less bitter, and it's just people's taste buds changing over the years. And people always say, "Oh, you've taken down the hops as you've got bigger," but that's not true. We've had to take them up just to match people's sort of taste profiles, basically.
Expectations.
And from what they're drinking. And you know, we make a lot of hop-forward beers. We use a lot of American hops. We'll go through that a little bit later in our warehouse where we store them and sort of profiles on it. But yeah, like I said, me and Brad are both beer geeks, really. That's how we started. That's how the business started.
So it began in my dad's garage, home brewing. We'll show you a little bit of that later on.
Yeah.
And it's I think there's not many sort of breweries with the sort of humble beginnings that we had. Literally from nothing, just getting into beer. We used to research every single day, and that 2-year period where we only had an idea to set a brewery up. We had no funding, no name, no brand, no recipes. We spent 2 solid years while, you know, having a family. You know, Gaz was getting married at the time, I think having a kid at the time, almost. And yeah, it's a lot of sacrifice comes with that. And I think it's only really, for me personally now, the last sort of, you know, couple of weeks where you've sort of given a chance to, you know, take a step back and realize actually what we've built and what we've done and what we've got. Because up until then, it's quite baffling that you don't actually spend the time to reflect on what you've sort of built and what you've achieved. And we employ now 137 people. And when this all kicked off, this sort of COVID, you know, one main thing that we wanted to do was keep all of our staff. And that's one thing that we have done, you know, through all this, is keep every single staff member sort of going, and didn't want to lay anyone off. And again, everyone's made a big sacrifice around that. So we're one big team, one big family, and it's sort of testament to sort of what we sort of built and what everyone else around us has helped build. Because it's not just me and Gaz no more, you know.
Yeah,
we're just the guys doing the stupid things at the front drinking beer.
Yeah, no, it is, because if it wasn't for our staff, then we wouldn't have a business, really.
Exactly.
And it's all built on the staff, and you know, we've had this some of the same staff with us from, you know, the very first day. And you know, like Brad said, it is tough times, and we haven't laid anybody off. We employ a lot of, you know, people from the hospitality industry, which is obviously totally shut. But hopefully we'll, you know, when it does kick back off, that we'll have everybody there eager to start again. So,
Yeah, cool, man. Right. So we've seen the outside. Should we go and see what would be our tap room? So a lot of people don't know we got a bar restaurant just behind us, behind these bifold doors. They all open up. We've got a really nice inside-outside feel. So I'm just going to park up my champagne, beer, my flute.
I don't usually drink in a beer and a flute, mine, but
Everyone said
I got tucked up there.
Tiny.
I got tucked up. I could have just used the can.
it's just my hands are so big.
Paul Reed said, "Who's your best employee?"
Not Paul. So just coming in. So first thing you do when you get into the brewery, into our tap room, this is our sort of not Hall of Fame as such, but some really things that we like to reflect on from over the years. So you can just see now, you know, we got the birthday pack that we just released back in February. We got last year's Clwb 7th birthday pack, which again was the first one we ever did, really successful. And, you know, just thank again all the breweries that we sort of partnered up with on that. Got a nice pair of Vans down there that my dad got me and Gaz for Christmas one year. I think it took him a long time to get it because they don't like to put company logos on there. So we had to fight a little bit for that. Best thing though for me is, if you can just sort of pop over here, so you've got Ash behind the camera, this is one of Gaz's very early recipes. And it's
2010?
so 16th of July 2010. And it's a beer called Tits Up, excuse my language.
I think that's how it went, I think.
And I think so I think that was the start of the Sarah's Tits sort of project for Gaz back in 2010.
A couple of guys are saying, "What's your favourite moment of from this cabinet?"
Straight up, two up Ash. Champion Beer of Britain. And we got invited, funny thing, we got invited to this from camera. They tell you're in the final and you can't tell anyone. So we went down there sort of last minute, and we were too tight at the time to buy a train ticket.
What was it, like 4 of us, 5 of us went down?
Like 3 of us went down. 3 of us, me, you and JT. So 3 of us went down, and it was cheaper. We were looking at last minute train tickets to London, there and back, and we were like, I can't spend a couple of £100 doing this. So we got a limo. So we went and we got a limo from Newport. I think it was a white, battered old sort of limo. Went down there, pulled up. We had champagne in the back. Lo and behold, we didn't know we were obviously going to win, but lo and behold, we rocked up there. I booked us an Airbnb in, it was pretty much the hood of London, I think, at the time. Cheapest thing we could afford. And we won Champion Beer Britain, and it was probably the best time, I think, as a brewer, especially with Gaz.
Yeah. Because
it was all, you know, Kutch's is sort of Gaz's recipe. Even name inspiration came from Gaz. So that was his little baby, and it's sort of stayed with us ever since. And I think, yeah, for us and probably more so for Gaz on a personal level, probably.
I think from our background, wasn't it? Obviously, you know, we're both home brewers and things like that, and when you see lots of sort of big established breweries winning it, like Timothy Taylor's, Fuller's, these huge breweries that have done so well over the years, and then we've rocked up, you know, the youngest.
Rocked up 3 years in, won this award, and it was like, who the hell are these guys? And I don't blame them, but lay your mark, and I think it's just testament to what we've done and all the effort and time that we put into brewing. We didn't just set a brewery up and, you know, 2 weeks later we're brewing. So, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that we've even done, to now. All right, so come on in. So what would be full of tables and chairs is now full of boxes and tables. So this has now become our online operation. So when bars closed, we were looking at how we could adapt as a business, really sort of get that entrepreneurial spirit going, get startup mode going. We firstly started doing off sales, so opened up a takeaway, started doing that, takeout. We then set up a little mini mart
where we pulled all the stock from all our bars and people could come in and buy beer, buy wine, spirits, you name it. So you didn't have to go to a major supermarket to get them. And now with the online shop and the support from all you guys, we've gone from one person that would be running our online shop on a day-to-day normal basis to now there's around 10 people in here every day, 7 days a week, packing, shipping everything out to you. And it's been overwhelming, you know, on such a huge level, not just on the order side, but on the admin side and the operations side and everything that you need to do to run something this scale. You know, it sort of took us by shock really, but we've tried to adapt as quick as we can, and we hope we've done a good job. And again, thank you all for supporting us on that front. So yeah, so this would then be your main bar. So I hope in one day, in a couple of weeks' time, maybe a couple of months, you know, you'll see this want to come down and have a day out down Tiny Rebel. So we've got a full-on blown menu, full-on blown bar, got a shop, and then we got a lovely transparency going into the brewery. So a big thing around what we do is sort of no secrets, I guess, transparent as possible. So brewery behind glass, our office upstairs is behind glass, and we just want to almost bring you into our world, so to say, and that's what we try to do here. What you found, guy?
I don't know.
It's a picture of the employee of the month.
That's our employee of the month. Thomas Morgan with an O. Great guy. He's been with us from the start. He's a good kid. And he just stays there like that.
He doesn't actually do anything, he just stays there on that photo.
And he's the worst at driving a forklift. Okay, so we're going to take you back through to the back of house. Back of house kitchen for all our staff. I love how they keep it so clean. We definitely didn't clean this up 10 minutes before we started. Definitely not. All right. So as you come through just before we head into the brewery, this is our sort of not Hall of Fame as such, but our timeline of beers. And again, just reflecting on this a little bit, me and Gaz were looking at this earlier and going, bloody hell, remember that? Remember that? I think a few that we picked out was this beer down here. This is beer called Doc Brown. We brewed this around probably 4 weeks into setting the brewery up. And it was off the back of, there was someone who ran a local pub and we had only just brought out Fubar and Urban IPA. But he was going, you need a brown ale. If you buy a brown ale, I'll buy it all. Oh, my customers will love it. So what do? We brew a brown ale. So we didn't stick to our guns, we brewed a brown ale, he didn't buy one cask of it. And that was the last time that we ever listened to anyone, so it was everything that we do now is what we want to do, and that's how we sort of roll, I guess.
Yeah.
Anything that sticks out for you, Guy?
Yeah, one of my favourites was the Hadouken. So this was one of our first beers as well. Obviously the Hadouken from the Street Fighter 2 game. Obviously with the arrows. There's a little funny story behind this one, is that we got the arrows wrong apparently, first of all.
First time round, yeah.
And someone came up to us in a beer festival and was like, look, I think you've got the arrows wrong. And we had to change it, but it was a great beer. It was a sort of a 7.4% IPA. We tried to do a lot with our branding, and we tried to relate, you know, to people just through influences of ourselves, whether it's computer games, movies. You know, you got another beer here, Filthy Animal was a Christmas beer. And obviously from Home Alone, and it was, yeah, so it's just a nice little wall of just memories, all our different beers that we've done, and
just stuff we're interested in.
Yeah.
You know, everyone asks, how do you come up with beer names? How do you come up with styles? And again, it's, you know, Gaz is like me. We both like 80s, 90s gaming, movies, music, and it all sort of stems from that really. And but now it's not just us two, now everyone gets an influence, you know, whether it be a beer name, a beer style, and it was a big part of when we did our sort of 8th birthday beers 2 months ago. You know, our brewers, all our packaging team, all our back of house team upstairs, you know, everyone got involved in that, and they're really, really cool projects for everyone to sort of dip in on, where there's no wrong answer. Every idea is a good answer, a good idea, and that's what sort of stems out of, I guess, creativity between a lot of people. So yeah, any on there that anyone sort of remembers back in the day? What we got?
We used to love.
So someone's just said the story behind Club Tropica, Tropicana and Tropica NA. So yeah, that's a really good one. So yeah, sometimes we get it wrong. And on that occasion, you know, when me and Gaz were sitting in the office in the old brewery going, wham, Club Tropicana, what a great name. Lo and behold, we never ever knew that beer would get to a level where we were getting sent a cease and desist letter from Tropicana drinks. So Tropicana, you all know the orange juice. You know, next thing we knew, you know, the beer was out there a little bit more, in the supermarkets a little bit, and next thing we knew, we had a cease and desist banged on. You know, we tried to IP it, get some intellectual property around it, because it is such a big product for us. And we lost that one, so we don't always get it right. But yeah, the story around the sort of two-finger sticking it up to them with NA non-alc, I think that was a great idea, and that actually came from, you know, just one of the guys upstairs. And yeah, anything you want to talk about, Gad?
No, I think we're all done here. I think probably getting thirsty, and we'll go on and try the beers, and we'll go through the brewing process, I think.
Let's do it.
Awesome.
Right. Well, I'm going to leave you to it, because Gaz doesn't let me in the brewery, right? After I messed up a few brews back in the day.
Right, come on in, guys. So, first part of the brewing process, I'll introduce Alex first. Alex is one of our brewers. He's our lead brewer. Fully qualified. You might have seen Alex on the beer tasting we done a couple of weeks ago, just out here in front of the mash tuns. But I think what we'll do first of all, you're probably thirsty, just open up the Stay Puft, and then we can talk a little bit about that as we're going through the brewing process. So, Stay Puft was, I'll talk about the name first and the branding. As I said earlier, and Brad was talking about it, is that we love sort of all our old school, you know, whether it's computer games, movies, and Stay Puft, obviously, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man from Ghostbusters, because it is a marshmallow porter. I'll explain a little bit about that as we go on, but yeah, crack on. I like to give this one a bit of just a longer pour, so you get a nice big head on it. And it's quite a nice tight head. It's a little bit different to our IPAs and lagers because of the makeup of the beer and the different carbonation. You get a little bit of tightness on the head, a little bit like that sort of Guinness cream flow style, which is quite nice. It's great. So you'll notice the first thing that we've sent in the pack is the malts. So what we'll do is that we'll start with the first one, which is the pale malt. Actually, I totally lied. We're not going to start with that. We're going to start with the water treatment. So there's 4 things that makes a beer. You have water, you have malt, you have hops, and you have yeast. Without any one of those things, you're not going to make a beer. So the first thing that we look at, we've talked a little bit about the malt outside in the silos. Now we're going to talk about what we do with our water first, because the water treatment is so important, especially on beers like New England IPAs, stouts, lagers, super important, and they're all different. So, Alex, can you just explain what we've got in this little jar and what we do?
So this is one of the most important parts of our process, just as Gaz is saying, and this is really what determines the final product in terms of how it feels in your mouth and how the beer actually tastes. So yes, the malt contributes a lot to the flavour, and yes, the hops contribute a lot to the flavour and aroma, but it's actually this stuff, our brewing liquor salts, which help us with the rest of it. And they kind of are a bit of an unsung hero in the brewing process. Yeah. So this one that I've got in my hands right here, this is what's known as gypsum. So it's calcium sulfate. I'll put that down now just in case I drop it. And that's something that we use to lower the acidity, or increase the acidity and lower the pH of our water. And that's really important because the enzymes that we use, which I'm sure me and Gaz will touch on in a bit, during our mashing process, in our mash tuns just to the right of me here, we need a certain pH range for these enzymes to work properly. And this helps us to target that.
Yeah.
There are a number of other liquor salts that we use, including calcium chlorides and also Epsom salts as well. And these all serve a different purpose. To put it into perspective, with a beer like our Stay Puft that you guys are all drinking at the moment, we actually have an elevated calcium chloride level in that one. And that's because it really imparts a smoother mouthfeel to that beer, and it enhances those kind of malty flavours that we're looking for in a beer.
So what would you change to a pale ale that would be different to the Stay Puft, like a stout or a porter?
Yeah, of course. So there's a couple of different ways that we tend to approach our pale ales, and it really depends what sort of style we're going for. So again, to put it into perspective, if we're looking at a beer like Easy Living, which is nice and crisp and clean, we tend to go for a higher calcium sulfate level and a lower calcium chloride level, because we're wanting it to end up more crisp. We're wanting to accentuate some of that hop bitterness and some of that crispness in there as well. So we tend to up our calcium sulfate.
Yeah.
But if we were targeting like a NEPA, some of you guys might have bought our birthday packs, which we were really proud of. The 2 NEPAs in there, they had an elevated calcium chloride level to increase that mouthfeel.
Yeah.
As you were saying.
Yeah. So I think it's important, like you said, it is an unsung hero. You know, people call it burgeonizing the water and things like that. But the treatment of the water is super important to the, you know, the finishing of the beer. And as Alex has said, different water treatments for different beers, and it's so important. So the water we get in Newport, it's pretty soft. So it's probably more suited to brewing a lager.
Yeah, definitely. Inherently, it would be.
Yeah, but for pale ales and IPAs.
Yeah, it depends what you're after. It really does depend what you're after. And this is the thing with brewing nowadays. We have the technology to be able to change our water profiles to suit our brewing needs.
Yeah, definitely.
Back in the day, we wouldn't have had that, and that's why people would talk about a Dublin water profile, for instance. Gaz was referring to this earlier.
Yeah, so if we were to brew, well, it's like that story, isn't it? It's like what we do is we mimic Dublin's water supply, because stout was famously most popular, and the best stouts came from Dublin. So we recreate Dublin's water supply when we do a stout. If we were to do a pale ale, then we'd recreate Burton-upon-Trent's water supply, because they were making the best pale ales. So basically that's what we're doing. I mean, there's a lot of chemistry behind it. We won't go into it because it'll probably bore you to death. But it's, you know, it's super interesting, and it's, you know, something good to know, and something we always talk about in our tours anyway.
Exactly.
But we'll jump onto the malt now, because that's obviously the first thing that you have. So you have, the first one is that we'll go for the crushed malt. So this is the crushed pale malt. Now, it comes in and it's delivered to us like that. So it comes in a whole kernel, like a coffee bean essentially, and we need to crush it just like a coffee bean. The reason why we need to crush it is because we need to release those flavours. You won't get out the sugars that we're looking for within that. Now, Alex, why do we crush the malt, and what is the next process that we do after crushing the malt?
So, super important. We won't take you guys into our mill room today, but we've got a mill room facility just outside, and that helps us take this, which is our pale malt, and turns it into this, which is known as grist in the trade, which is our crushed malt. So essentially what happens is the malt, the malted barley, will pass through our mill and be crushed and broken up so that it exposes the starchy endosperm in the center of that grain. And the reason that we want that is because that contains all of the starch that we need for our mashing process. So again, just to the right of me is our mash tun. I'm going to be referring to this a lot for the next sort of 5 minutes or so. This is where we will mash those grains in. So we've already talked about our liquor, which is in layman's terms water, and that's treated with our salts. We're then going to mix our liquor or water with our mash, with our barley, and that will create our mash, which 2 weeks ago me and Gaz were talking about, and that's our porridge-like mixture. It's essentially a perfect ratio that the brewers will calculate, where we're mixing that hot water and that barley, trying to extract the sugars from that using the natural enzymes.
So it'll look a little something like this. This is what we've done earlier.
It's the Mark Gammon special.
Yeah, so
nice.
again, it's a little, we've mixed this with a bit of hot water to recreate that porridge, like sort of texture, and it looks like a bit, it looks like a bad porridge basically. But it's what we get inside the mash tuns. Al, do you want to carry on from that?
Yeah, so what's really important in our malt is how we crush it. We don't want our grist, our crushed malt, to be over-crushed. If it's over-crushed, then we'll end up with a stuck mash, and that is a brewer's worst nightmare. We want our mash to be able to run off freely and nice and easily. Brewers just want to have an easy day at the end of the day, so the easier we can make it for ourselves, the better. So there is a perfect balance there.
When we mix the liquor, or the treated water, with the malt that goes into the mash tun, how important is the temperature with regard to mixing with that?
Super important, super important.
So what sort of temperatures do we look for within the mash tun then?
So within the mash tun, it can range from anywhere between about 75 degrees centigrade all the way up to about 78 to 79 degrees if we were doing our Clwb, for instance.
Yeah.
So it is quite a big temperature range. So generally, for most of our beers, we're looking between 65 and about 68, 69 degrees centigrade.
Yeah. So obviously, the sugars that we're creating within the mash tun, like Alex said, with that enzymic reaction, that's what we're really looking for, is getting the right sugars, because there's different types of sugars that we create within the mash tun, and Alex said, different temperatures will produce different sugars. So we need to get the right sugars within that beer. We don't want the beer too sweet, we don't want it too thin. So this part is, is very, very important. And should we just explain quickly how the mash tun works?
Yeah, of course. The mash tun is essentially a giant colander. So at the bottom of it, about here, sits a perforated plate. And that's where the mash itself, that porridge mixture, will sit on top of that. And it will form its own kind of filtration bed. So as a brewer, it's our job to then separate a sticky, sugary solution, which brewers refer to as wort, from that solid mash in the centre there. And it's really difficult because what we're trying to do is maintain a perfect balance throughout that process, which is known as lautering, the separation process.
Yeah.
If we don't maintain that balance, again, we'll crash our bed, and that's it. We don't get any more out of the mash tun. And that's a lot of beer to go down the drain that's wasted. So it's really important that we balance that process.
Yeah.
Throughout that as well, we're then conducting a process that's known as sparging. So this is the process of rinsing the grains with more of our hot liquor, hot water to you guys, just to make sure we're extracting the most amount of sugar that we can from that mash. So that's really important to us as well for our efficiency. Gaz is just cracking open a bottle of our wort for you guys now.
So we've sent you a sample of a bottle of wort. We asked you to put it in the fridge as well, because this wort, we call it wort, it's spelt wort, because it's the liquid that we get off the mashing in the grains. So if we were to pour out this liquid in here now, this is the same liquid as you would get within this bottle. Now, we sent it to you obviously just to have a smell. You can try it a little bit if you want. It is a very, very sweet liquid. And the reason why we asked you to put it in the fridge is just to keep it fresh, because it's not meant to be in a bottle. So it's there just to explain and show you what the liquid that we get off those grains are. It's not beer yet, because it's just a very sugary liquid. So yeah, have a smell of it. It's very, very sweet. We just used pale malt for this one. We actually did it on this little bit of kit here, which is our old homebrew kit. This is around 10 years old. We spent 2 years homebrewing on this kit before we started Tiny Rebel. Just obviously doing all our R&D trial recipes. So beers like Kutch were made on this kit, Dirty Stopper, which is one of our original stouts. So we've still got it, we're still super proud of it, and we still use it now and again for a bit of R&D, a bit of fun as well. So yeah, try that, have a smell of it, have a look at the colour. It's not very appealing, it's not something that we do try and, Paul Reed said he was going to try and neck a bottle of it, but I don't believe that. But I mean, once you you know, you've sampled it, you've smelt it, pour it away. As I said, it's not meant to be kept in the bottle. It's meant to just be as an example for you guys at home. Just pour it away.
Or cook with it. Try cooking with it. It's pretty tasty.
You could do. Yeah. So we also sent you another sample because we've shown you the pale malt. Pale malt is the majority of malt that we use, but the reason why we're drinking Stay Puft now is that you might ask, why is that dark? If this word that you sent us was quite light, well, the reason behind that is that we use different types of malt. So we've sent you some crystal malt, some Cara malt. That is a crystal malt as such, really. There's different types of crystal Cara malts. It depends how much they roast those malts. So I'll let Alex, I mean, you can try this. Feel free to try it. It is quite tasty. It's perfectly, you know, it's harmless. It's quite interesting when you do try it. Alex, can you explain a little bit more about these different types of malt and what they do? Want to have a look at that? You've probably seen it. You've got it yourselves anyway. But give us this different colour that you see in the Stay Puft.
Yeah, of course. So certainly in our Stay Puft and in beers like our Kutch, it's the specialty malts that are really playing that major role in terms of that malt backbone. The reason that they're so different is to do with that malting process. So from grain coming off the field, it has to be germinated in order to stimulate modification, which is what we're looking for as brewers. But then what happens to it is the malts just have to make it a stable product, and they have to kiln it. And this is what gives us these characteristic differences in our malts here. So our pale malt, which we talked about first, that was kilned really lightly, and that's why it's got a light, toasty, biscuity kind of flavour. In comparison, our crystal malt, which we've just been talking about, that was actually stewed first, and then it was kilned. And that creates this amazing crystalline sugar structure on the inside. So if you chew that between your teeth at the moment, you'll notice that it's really sweet, it's a bit crunchy as well, and that's why it's called crystal malt, because it has that crystalline structure inside the malt. Other malts that we use in terms of our Stay Puft are things like roasted malt and also our smoked malt. And again, these are treated in a different way to make them taste or look a particular way. So a lot of the colour comes from our roasted barley that we use, which is almost like coffee beans. It's that kind of colour. And that really adds that black, dark night.
Yeah, as you can obviously see in the Stay Puft, and it just gives you a good example of sort of our Club Tropica or Club Tropica that you were drinking outside, and that colour, that is mostly pale malt, and obviously the Stay Puft that you're trying now has a lot more darker malts, and that's what gives it the colour. So it's a good comparison. So once this process is over, how long does this process take from start to finish, would you say?
It's usually about an hour and a half to 2 hours in terms of the process time. It really depends on the skill of the brewer and how easy the mash is being for him on the day.
Yeah.
The mashing rest is normally about 50 or 40 minutes. So that's where we let it sit and we let the enzymes do their things and extract the sugar to give us our sweet wort.
So once this process is going on and the wort is going through the bed of malt, and we sparge more water, more liquid over the top, we sprinkle it over the top. Explain what happens to that liquid then and where it goes in the next process.
So, just like Gaz was talking about, that bottle of wort that you've got, we're now all caught up with that stage of the process. So, that stuff in the bottle that you've got is really unstable, and that's exactly why Gaz has asked you to store it in the fridge, to keep it nice and safe. So, for the brewer, we want to make it more stable. And in doing that, we have to boil it, and that's to kill any microorganisms that are in there, such as bacteria or wild yeasts. Because we want our product to be stable, we want it to taste the same every single time. And if we had those microorganisms in there, it definitely wouldn't.
Yeah, so that's why it's important to pour this away, don't keep it as a memento, get rid of it like that. Happy days.
The other thing that we do during this boiling process is we add our hops, which Gaz has got in his hands because he's super excited about hops. And this imparts our bitterness, and it also imparts the flavours and aromas that you guys are looking for in most of the beers that we make.
Yeah. So obviously we've asked you to make your own little hop brew. We'll talk a little bit more about that down the line with Mark, our operations manager. And but just take a good smell of it, because what happens is that when we boil this liquid up and we add these hops, it's you get those real pungent aromas from it, and you can smell it like that. I always like to crush them up a little bit and get your nose in there. Mine's big enough.
Between your fingers as well.
And yeah, and you know, you get that real citrusy grassiness. Some people say it smells a little bit like cannabis. I wouldn't know what that smells like, but it's from the same family. You can't smoke it. I've not tried, but you can't. But we put these within the boil. At what point, Alex, do we put these within the boiler?
So there's generally 2 points during that boiling process that we add our hops, and that splits them into 2 categories. So we've got our early hops and our late hops, and these give us 2 different flavour profiles that we're looking for in a beer. The first is with our early hops, and that gives us the bitterness that we like in our beer. Especially with a sweet beer like Stay Puft, we need that bitterness to impart balance on that beer as a whole. And that happens by our alpha acids, which are in these hops. And that is a type of acid compound that breaks down during the boil and gives us our isoalpha acids, which are bitter. The other type of hop that we add is our late hops, and this is added at the end of the boil, and this imparts all of the flavours and aromas that we really like. So these could be anything from red kind of berry flavours, juicy mango flavours, or citrus flavours depending on the hops and the temperatures that they're added at.
So we can say about 90 minutes for the boil, so, total of how long?
Yeah, so for our lazy boy, the boil is 90 minutes, and for the rest of our beers, it's a flat rate hour for us there, and then we'll whirlpool with our late hops for about 20 minutes.
And then what happens, once that boil is complete, what do we then do with that hop wort that we're talking about then? What happens to it then?
Of course, so we've now got this stable wort, and we've added our hops to it. The only thing that's stopping it from being beer is the fact it's not had the yeast introduced to it. Now, we couldn't just add the yeast into the copper where it's been boiled, because the yeast would die because of the temperature that it's sat at. So we need to cool it down. Now, we have a thing called a plate heat exchanger, or a paraflow, which allows us to cool that liquid down to room temperature, about 20 degrees centigrade for most of our ales. And that's when we'll then pitch our yeast into one of our fermenters, which you guys can see just at the back there, some of our big triple tanks.
Which I think we'll talk about now. We'll go on to the cellaring part. So once that kind of process is done, that's your job done then, isn't it?
Pretty much. We hand it over to the cellar.
Yeah, so I mean, that whole process will take a day, because there's a lot of cleaning involved. I think being a brewer is a lot of time spent is cleaning, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because hygiene is so important.
80% of your day really is cleaning.
Yeah. So what we'll do now, we'll move on further down to the cellaring. We'll have a little look as we walk on down. Thank you, Alex.
No worries, guys.
Thank you very much. So like Alex was saying, once that liquid is ready and cooled down, it gets put into these huge tanks, these fermenters. We call these DPVs, or dual purpose vessels, because we ferment in them or we can chill in them. We'll talk a little bit more into what we do there with Mark just in a minute. Anybody guess how many litres we can hold in that? These are quite new tanks, these ones. They are fairly big. I'll stand in the way so you can get a gauge of how tall they actually are. I'm 6'8", and I'm not really, but 6 foot. But these hold 15,000 litres, so we can fit 3 brews within there. So where Alex was explaining, we'll get 3 brews, 3 of those mash tuns, those liquids within that tank. We call it a treble tank. So it allows us, we sort of utilise the height of the building, because obviously they take a footprint up, and the most efficient is to go up and utilise that space that we have in the air above us. So as we walk on down, again, we've got a few more ingredients. We use lots of different ingredients for different beers. So you don't have this, but this is what they call chocolate nibs. We put this into different style beers. If we're making a chocolate beer, we can put these into the mash tun. Beautiful smell on them. It smells absolutely amazing. We can put these into the mash. Then what we have there, a little bit on this side, some coconut. So we use a lot of coconut within one of our 8th birthday beers, Not So Fast Round Boy. That will go in, you know, it can go into the mash tun, it can go into the fermenter later on. So it's, we use many different ingredients because, I mean, that's the fun part about brewing, and that's the fun part about drinking these different types of beer. So we'll go on further now, down into the cellar in. So generally what we have the brew house area this side where I'm looking at now. Generally that is where the beer is made, and the beer then goes into the tank farms where it kind of matures for up to, you know, from 2 weeks up to 6 weeks, depending on what beer it is and what we're putting into that beer afterwards. So, this is Mark.
You feel like a proper pub standing here waiting for you.
Keep 2 meters away. He totally forgot that 2 meters rule.
You saw him, he walked into me.
So Mark's our operations manager. He likes to think he's the brains, but he's not. Alex is really. But
Nice.
so
Nice.
what we're going to do now, Mark is going to take us through the cellaring. It doesn't sound very exciting, but it's such an important aspect of the beer because, you know, once Alex brews his beer, then that's that job done, and that's a very important job. But to get out of the beer what you really need, then that is all done within cellaring, and it's super important because that's where the yeast goes in, and all the work kind of happens, and it's such a crucial stage. And we'll let Mark explain a little bit now. We'll go around to the underside of the tank farm. This is just for you.
Thank you very much.
So again, just to get straight into the beer, we'll start with the framboesi, and there's a reason why we have chosen the framboesi at this point, which Mark will explain, because it's very important at the cellaring stage. Now, crack it open. I hope you enjoy it. It's one of my favourite beers, and we've been brewing it now for about 4 years, and it's a great beer, and it's in our core product, and there's not many breweries that have a sour beer within their core range. We do. It sells very, very well, and we love it. But so Mark, once the liquid comes over to the fermenter, can you explain what is the next steps and what happens?
You have about 4 or 5 stages in cellar. As Gaz said, it's probably 90% of our flavour profile. It's certainly not 90% of the finished product. Everything really starts in brew house. You only really work with what the brewers have made, what Alex and the guys have done. So the first action after that's primary fermentation. We aim to get that done in about 5 days, just so we've got a consistent throughput. If it takes longer, but we tend to be pretty on top of that at the moment. The bigger tanks, as Gaz was saying, the bigger they get, they actually have a greater convection, so you've got more surface area. So they're actually much easier to control. It's actually harder to slow them down sometimes than it is anything else. So once that's out of the way, that's where most of the alcohol's made. All the sugars that the guys have produced, there's high-end and low-end sugars, as well as proteins, have been assimilated by the yeast, and you've got a sort of a beer that ends up with even a certain amount of sugar that is left over, sort of a big IPA, sort of a stay puff that the guys were talking about earlier. That has a really sort of large, sort of texturised amount of sugar, and that's all set in the mash tun. Or you go right the way through with like a lager. It's a very long, slow fermentation for a lager. It tends to go very, very low. So probably about a quarter of the sugar that's left overall, as you would get from one of the bigger IPAs. It's left because you're very dry, textured mouthfeel. Yeah. So same for the framboesi. So this is our take on a framboise. It's a little bit drier. You want it sort of spritzy, sort of champagne-y. It's a lot thinner than most beers out there at the moment. We actually kettle sour ours, so the souring process takes place upstream, and then the guys will put a bacterial culture into it in the kettle. They'll leave it for 48 to 72 hours, and then we'll boil that off, kill the bacteria, so it's not going anywhere near the fermentated. Would be nice to have a sour part someday, Gaz.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
Yeah.
We've just had a comment through. Can you stop using such big words that no one understands?
What did they use?
And
Which part of Wales are you from?
Which part of Wales am I from? Oh, Darlington. I'm from Cornwall actually, but I sound like I fell out of Eton, which is not really true. Alex came from Scotland, and he's very clean cut as well. So after that, the sour wort will convert into here, and we'll start adding yeast. Fermentation will take place. After primary fermentation has come through about 90%, we'll add raspberries at that point. We don't use wild raspberries, we use sort of raspberry juice that's been cooked down, also pureed raspberry, just so we've got control of it, so we're not bringing any wild bacteria or any wild spores or any wild yeast into the brew. After that, it's then cooled down, we let carbonation come place. It's a lot higher carb than some of our beers as well, sort of about 5%, we get a sort of spritzy sort of feel to it.
So that process, that yeast fermentation, how long can that fermentation take?
We tend to
Start
aim
to finish.
We tend to aim for 5 days, but realistically, you know, sometimes 7, sometimes 8 if it's something larger. Some of the big IPAs, that 12% amplified, that takes about 10 to 11 days. We try to keep quite track, isn't it?
Yeah.
After that's done, we go into the dry hopping process for a lot of our beers. So at the same point that we'd add our fruits, we actually add hops, which you guys can put the
Yeah, so this is a really important part here, is obviously the hops. Now, we actually use more hops this side than we do within the boiler that Alex was talking about. And Mark has done a little bit of experiments here just to show you guys.
So if you look on the right, that will be it's sort of what you guys have done at home. We've added hops at sort of hotter temperature. I think I added it at 68, which replicates about where our whirlpool is at a lot of the time. But I think you guys are asked to go boiling. You'll see they break up a lot more. Whereas on the left-hand side, I've added them at about between 60 and 18, which is where most of our cellar temperatures come in. And you can see that the hops don't have the same sort of extraction point. Now, there's lots of reasons for that, and I won't talk about like why oils evaporates and sort of things. But what it does show you, it's really hard to get the sort of same level of contact in dry hopping in a cooler temperature than it does at hot contact. And you need to extract a lot more from those hops. We're also aiming to get harder things out of there, oils and really complicated bits. So these are all the sort of fruity, juicy notes you get into it. If you take your hop packet, if you've got any left, and break them up, I don't know if you can see in this light, Ash, you'll see very tiny little yellow beads in there. In those areas, they're lupulin glands. And in there is contained most of the oils and most of the sort of hard acids and things that we like from hops. And they break down at hotter temperatures. We need to use colder temperatures to extract them. And so we need to put a lot more force and a lot more time into them. And of course, a lot more hops. This is why we sort of double, triple, quadruple, octuple the amount of hops that we actually use.
So obviously, once the yeast has done its work, it's done its magic, that is monitored every day. We keep checking, because the yeast eats the sugars, turns those sugars into alcohol, is what we're looking for. Turns it into CO2 that we're not really interested in at that point. And then, once that is done, the process of dry hopping can start. But the reason why we're drinking framboesi at this stage, because it's not just dry hops that go into the tanks. We also add a lot of fruit, so the framboesi has a lot of fruit. How much raspberry goes in the framboesi?
The raspberry sits about 500 kilos at the moment, so 50 hectares, so it's about 10 grams per litre or so, I think.
Yeah. And then at what point would that go into the fermenter then?
So that'll enter the fermenter just at the end of that primary fermentation. I was talking about the sort of aggressive ferment. So the sugar that's in the raspberries will be certainly eaten by the yeast. It'll be converted into more alcohol and a tiny bit more sort of CO2. And that way it doesn't sort of get through and ruin pack types.
Yeah. So obviously you get that lovely sort of red hue within this, that raspberry colour, and that is obviously through all the puree getting put into the beer. But like Mark said, the reason why we put it in towards the end is because it keeps a lot more flavour. When at the beginning, the CO2 that's created may scrub a lot of that flavour that we're looking for from the raspberries off. So as Mark said, it's important to put it in right at the end to lock in as much of that flavour as we possibly can. Absolutely super important. So once all that process is done, the sugars have all been eaten up, what do we do then?
So after we've eaten the sugars up and we've sort of gone into our dry hopping procedure, we don't cool that right down as well. You do have a little bit of fermentation that happens with hops. As you can also see, it's important to keep a little bit of temperature in that, just so you get a better extraction, which is much, much better. Once that's all done, we'll then, that will take about another sort of 5 to sort of 7 days on the dry hopping process. We'll also agitate it with pumps or bumps, and we'll put it in a different temperature depending on the hops that we use. Once that's all done, we'll chill that down. We'll start de-hopping it, so we'll remove hops from pressure at the top, and we'll sort of take hops out the bottom of the tank just to make sure the beer's a little bit clearer. And all in all, that chill process takes another 3 days. So at the moment, we sit between 14 and 17 days to really finish a beer from Alex's starting process to the point where we take it out of cellar and we start processing it into packaging.
Yeah. So, and how cold then do we cold crush our tanks? How cold does that beer then get to?
So it depends on the actual style of beer. Obviously, some of the higher ABVs we can actually get a lot colder. The colder, the better for us to process in packaging. So we can get down to sort of -1, -2. Of course, something like Clwb, it will freeze. It's not got the alcohol content to really rebuff it, so it will be about sort of 5 or 6 degrees. Cask as well sits at about 5 or 6 degrees as well.
Yeah. So obviously we're very proud of our Lazy Boy, and we don't rush our lager, our Lazy Boy lager. How long would we chill that beer down for?
So we probably have it on chill for about 12 to 13 days, but all in, including the maturation process, it takes 28 to 32 days for us to do it. So we properly lager, hard lager.
Yeah, as it should do. So I think what we're going to do now is move on to the next stage, because once the beer is ready in tank, there's a whole lot of other processes that we have to go through. Sort of centrifuging, which we'll talk about now, then into packaging, which is, it's all, every stage of what we're talking about is absolutely crucial, because you can have the best beer in the world, and if at one stage something goes wrong, then you've completely ruined that beer. So we'll move on to the centrifuge, and we'll let Mark talk a little bit more about it.
So this is our centrifuge here, located quite near packaging, which is nice, because I don't like walking. This is a significant investment for us at the time. It's one of the larger ones, not one of the larger ones, one of the larger ones you can buy sort of wholesale into the market. Clwb do it. And what this does, as you could see with the hopping process that I showed you, as the hops sort of settle out to the bottom, gravity takes a lot of effect because they're larger particles, and that will sit down to a little bit. But you still have quite a lot of hop that's left in the beer. What this does is it increases the gravitational force of something. So much like if you're swinging a bucket of water around with your arm and the water stays in the bottom to it, you're using centrifugal force. And what this does is it exerts centrifugal force over the beer and flies out very large. You can that on purpose. So it flies out very large particles out to the side. So you've got the beer comes in at the bottom of the disc stack and flows over the top of these very thin, tiny little plates. And as the plates are spinning very fast, about 6,000 RPM, the larger sort of particles are flown out to the side, and the beer is then ejected out of the top and out through, and then finally through the carbonator, and then through the carbonator into the CTs, which is nice and easy. Careful use of a centrifuge can sort of give us quite a lot of different options. So we can get our lager pretty much 99% polished with one of these by rowing it very slowly. So the beer takes a lot longer to go off, so a lot more particulate, the yeast, everything's flown out to it. Or if you run it very, very quickly, you'd be looking at some of our more hazy, darker, then should be a ducky or any of the sort of specialty neakers that we've done or IPAs we've done in the past. That's sort of where we're coming from. Mo looks like he's got a question. No?
So I think, the most important thing with the centrifuge is that the only beer that we actually filter is our Lazy Boy Lager to give it that really polished look. Everything else is passed through the centrifuge. And what that does, like Mark was saying, is give us consistency in the clarity of our beers. You'll notice a lot of our beers, and I've talked about it in the last few weeks, they'll have a slight haze, some will have a bigger haze than others. That is all controlled basically through this machine. We can choose the speeds that it goes through and how much we want to clear that beer up. If we don't want to clear it up, depends on the beer, doesn't it?
Yeah,
so,
depends on the beer. It also depends on how long it's had in tank. I mean, if we've had taken a bit longer over it, say the weekends happen, we've had 2 days where we're not really working, we've got an extra 2 days on chill, it's a lot easier to function centrifuge. So it's really down to the guys, how well the guys operate it.
Yeah. And what we'll do now, we'll go on to the into the packaging process. So this obviously happens, like Mark was saying, through the transfer of the beer from one tank into the packaging. Now, I love this little contraption here. Looks like a giant spring. It's not a giant spring. It's actually a nitrogenator. Now, we put a lot of CO2 into our beers. That's the beers that you drink will have CO2 carbonation in there, carbon dioxide. With our beers like our Stay Puft, what we try and use is a little bit of nitrogen to give it like that tighter bubble I was talking about earlier when we poured the Stay Puft. That it had a nice tight head, a nice sort of smaller bubbles. Now that is created through this. Do you want to explain how we managed to do that?
Okay, so nitrogen is really difficult to keep in a liquid because it's a lot lighter than sort of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a lot heavier, which is why when it comes into there it's got a larger bubble. I won't really go into it. But nitrogen being sort of 80% of our atmosphere, it's very hard to keep into a liquid. It wants to escape and keep into things. So the only way to really ramp it in there is with really cold temperatures, that's as cold as we can get in the chilling, and pressurise it in there, actually force it into the liquid. And what this does is the beer enters into the bottom, and we put some nitrogen in there as well. So it's a lot very large gassy bubbles. And this big renovating pump will churn and put a lot of pressure into the beer. Inside these actual spring-like coils, there's a series of very tight little loops that goes all the way around. And as it's forced round here at a very great speed, the pressure increases very, 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 very high inside these springs. As it comes out, it's a nice large hole at the back of it. It doesn't really force out very quickly. But inside here is a very, very high amount of pressure, and that forces the nitrogen in there. And that we can keep in for about 24 hours. So what we do is we do this at the end of our packaging run. So we put carbon dioxide in there, and we'll actually knock a bit of carbon dioxide out by putting nitrogen in to make sure you've got that sort of smoother, creamier flow. It's very difficult for small pack. We've managed to get it okay, but it's very hard to do without. That's why widgets were around for a long time.
Yeah, but it looks great. That's why I love it. It looks,
it looks like proper science, doesn't it?
Yeah, like from a cartoon or something. But yeah, right, into packaging.
A few people are asking if you're doing any more sours, guys.
Yeah, well, we've got rhubarb and custard that keeps coming back and forth. We've got one coming on this Friday. Which is the one we got this Friday?
Rhubarb and custard.
Rhubarb and custard this Friday. I mean, that's one of my favourites, is rhubarb and custard. I absolutely love it. It's it just reminds me of the old school sweets. I am a little bit older than everybody else here. So I can remember the rhubarb and custard sweets, and to me it's just like a rhubarb and custard sweet. So you'll see these tanks here now. These are what we call our packaging tanks. bright tanks, conditioning tanks. So the beer that will hit these tanks will be ready to package, almost ready to drink before it goes into its final destination. So I think what we'll crack on with here is that we'll jump straight into peaches and cream. And there's obviously, again, there's a reason why we are drinking peaches and cream at this stage. And I shall let Mark talk about why we are drinking it now.
So peaches and cream has a small amount of nitrogen in there, so you can actually see you've got a slightly tighter head. We do nitrogenate it, not to the same level that you do with Stay Puft. It doesn't quite need that sort of stouty sort of feel to it, but it is sort of very creamy, very light beer. So we do want to give a certain amount of nitrogen in there. And of course, that happens actually in the packaging tank. So we will nitrogenate around, and that really starts to recirculate it through there, and that's what gives it sort of a quite more creamy, sort of full, rich mouthfeel.
Yeah. So obviously, you know, carbonation levels are super important. The amounts of CO2, especially within like beers like a lager, will have a sort of higher carbonation level than say an IPA or a stout. What do we do with this beer that's slightly different to give it a bit of a smoother mouthfeel and that creaminess?
So that creaminess, we also add lactose into this, quite high up in the stream. So this is back on the brewers, it's back on the copper. We add lactose into there. That gives you, it's an unfermentable sugar. So when we were talking about that yeast eating those sugars, yeast won't eat lactose, it's too big for it. So we leave it in the tank, and it will sort of give you a sort of bit more rich, a bit more full mouthfeel, certainly a bit more creamy. And that combined with things like the way we prepare it, with nitrogen, with a few things in there, it makes it sort of a much more rich, dense palate.
Yeah, awesome. So as I said, we've got a few more tanks at the back there. These tanks will all hold 5,000 litres, which is a broom's worth. We've got some double tanks at the back there. The beer doesn't sit in these tanks for long, in all honesty. They're just there. It comes in. It's carbonated. It's ready. It's, you know, hit its specs. It gets tested again. We test all our beer right the way through the process. And you know, maybe how many days will it sit in here, Mark?
Maximum 2, and that will again be a weekend, depending on the beer. So most of the time, if we've got a beer in tank here, it'll be open and done within 24 hours. We've done it quicker as well if we're really busy in summer. Something like cask, if we're doing that, when cask comes back for us, we'll be able to sort of take these in and churn these out in 10, 12 hours sometimes. So it depends on the temperature.
Yeah. So once the beer is ready and it's hit all our specs within these tanks, we'll then obviously put it into its package type. So, you know, one of our most popular package types is what you're all drinking now, is can. It's, you know, it's super important to us. We've just made a huge investment in a new canning line that we'll go and have a look at now. So we'll just go around the other side and we'll explain how we can our beers and how it all works.
So it's quite a large footprint for this canning line. It's designed to have a case packer on the end of it, which we haven't got yet. Waiting to install it later in the year. But at the moment, the reason for this is so it's just the amount of volume of cans you can put out. So this canning machine, when it runs full pelt, can put out 15,000 cans an hour, which was realistically what we were doing in about 12 hours on our old line up until about the beginning of January. So this has been a real turn of the screw for us. At the moment, the cans enter into here, and then they're put up onto the racks, converted all the way down to conveyors. Then goes through here with a deionized air blower, cleans all the can as much as it can be. Oh no, someone's written, to be fair there. I think that was our packaging manager Paul, who can't be here tonight because he's having a bath. So the cans then convey down into here and then into the filler. So if you want to come in a bit closer, Ash. This was turning until about 30 seconds ago, but I was waiting so long for Gaz to talk about brewing, it's now going again, and I won't turn it on because the noise of the alarm to warn people it's turning on is horrendously loud. But it's got 21 filling heads, which is really quick and easy. It also does something really clever. This is a KHS line from Germany, but it takes any of the oxygen that's left, any of the air that's in the can, it takes it out and then fills it full of beer. And that's really good for our impact stability and really good for the quality of the cans that we're putting out now. That's the biggest thing, that's the most exciting thing for us on that. The cans will then come in and get fed, and it comes around to the back. If we go all the way through the back, it'll just feed out the other side. It's then got a seaming head, the lid gets seamed on with 2 chucks, and it goes through the X-ray machine. Do you want to talk about the X-ray machine, guys?
Yeah, so obviously Mark was talking a lot about quality, and obviously as we've grown as a business, you know, quality's always been paramount to us, but obviously when we can advance in sort of technologies and, you know, we can afford to scale up to a machine like this. So this machine, the whole setup cost us just over £1 million. And as we were saying, this can can 15,000 cans an hour. In comparison to our old machine, which was 1/10 of the price of this, that was only 1,500 cans an hour. But it's not just about speed, it's about the quality on how it does it, and that is super important. So, as Mark was saying, the rotary head, the beer will come in, it'll get filled on the sort of carousel turning around, and it'll come off, it'll get seamed through the canning line or through the can seamer, but then obviously it'll exit into this X-ray machine. And what that X-ray machine is doing is measuring the fill levels within that can, always making sure that the fill levels are right. I mean, that's super important for you as a consumer because you don't want to be short filled, but for us it's more so a quality procedure that when cans can be underfilled, they can get too much oxygen in there, can lead to all sorts of problems, you know, just an inferior product. So it's just belt and braces and extra sort of quality procedures that we put in place to be able to do that, you know. An X-ray machine isn't cheap, but we felt that it's super important to have it in place just for, you know, quality, also trading standards, there's that side of it, but and you don't want to be short filled. So generally now a full canning run will take us how many hours?
We can do one in about 2 hours, although the machine can go 15,000 cans an hour. Welsh boys cannot. So to be fair, even English lads or Scottish or an Irish fellow, we've got one of those. So as I say, fill through the line. Realistically, the fastest we can pack manually on here is about 5,000 cans an hour. So we're up to about 2 runs a day at the moment, which is it's been a saving grace over this now.
Yeah. So obviously we've got the next beer, which is Clwb. So obviously Clwb was one of our first ever brands, the Welsh Red Ale. We talked about it earlier. Champion Beer of Britain 2015, and it's one we're super proud of. It was always designed to be on cask. That was what it was born on. That's what it won its Champion Beer of Britain in 2015 for. But we also love it in keg and in can as well. So, and the reason why we chose it to talk about it down here, why was that, Mark?
Well, it's talking about that clarity again and careful use of the centrifuge. I will just get a light on so we can see through it. But again, this isn't a filtered beer. It's evolving quite a bit of gas at the moment. But as you can see, she has cleared up pretty much the same in line as you would get it on cask. The big challenge for us to put it into kegs and cans is to replicate that cask feel for that beer. It has to be slightly more carbonated because it just didn't work. It seemed a little flat coming out of the can. We did try it at sort of a keg carbonation level, a cask carbonation level, sorry. But we get it where we have. We've got it cleared up as much as we can in the centuries. You've still got everything that's naturally there in a cask. You've still got yeast. You've still got all the other bits and pieces that's naturally there in a cask. We've cleared it up in a similar way. What we haven't done is use casking agents, things like isinglass and things that just aren't suitable for vegans. So the can is suitable for vegan. It's very important for us to keep that sort of cask feel for that beer.
Yeah. So how long has this been installed now, Mark?
I think our first lines went through. It was the first week of March, really.
Yeah.
When we started really sort of coming into this, so we only had it, we only had it a month, month and a half, really. So we hardly even vented it. It's barely running.
Yeah. So I think we're very lucky that it was obviously finished, obviously before the problems that we're all facing now. So I think it's helped us massively without because we're selling so many cans at the moment, and it's just great for us. It's an awesome bit of kit, and it was a huge investment, but an investment that we thought was well worth putting in, especially with our sort of increased sales in cans. We into the supermarkets and things like that now. But as Mark was saying, the biggest problem that we face now is that yes, it can go super fast, but it can only go as fast as the guys can put it into boxes. So what we're going to have within, if we just come around my way, so within the next few months we'll have a machine on the end of here, and the machine, what we'll be able to do is pack the beers itself. So rather than humans putting them into boxes, it'll all be done by machine. So we can do the 4-packs, 6-packs, all these fridge packs. It'll do it automatically. Also the 24s. So that is really important. And obviously, as production ramps up again with regards to cans and we get more listings, then obviously this machine is future-proofing us for all of that. It's an awesome bit of kit, and yeah, love it. Right, so what we're going to do now is that we're going to walk through into the warehousing. Just to show you, we've got chilled storage, and obviously Brad was talking about earlier that we're struggling for space, but it's struggling for chilled storage as well, and that's why we wanted to take you down to that side to show you the new sort of logistics centre that we're looking at, warehouse storage, new offices, but what I'm concentrating on is just going to show you into the warehouse now. So as you can see, we have a few more tanks here. So these are more conditioning tanks, bright tanks, serving tanks, whatever you want to call them. Again, they're just double-sized tanks, so we can hold 10,000 litres in there as opposed to 5,000 litres over that side. and it's just extra capacity. So double brews in there, single brews on that side, but it's exactly the same process as we look at just there as well. So as we go into the warehouse, now chilled storage is so important. I mean, being in the UK, we only need to turn on the chills on now. So, you know, we keep all our wet product, whether it's all the cans, keg, and also to us, super important. So, as you can see this side, you'll see all our keg stock. Bit gutting at the moment, obviously, with the bars shutting down. We're not the only brewery faced like this. We do have a little bit of stock with regards to that. But as you can see, it's like this most of the time anyway. We're always at capacity. It's around a 2-3 week turnaround in this warehouse. People then, we're back on. So sorry about that, I think we lost people within the cold storage then. There's not much signal in there because obviously it is a concealed space, there's no windows, there's nothing, because we need to keep that cold in through all the installation that we do in there. So we're just taking our back out in the yard. So what we've done, we've come right the way around the brewery from start to finish process. You've got the grain trailers here. So these are the farmers' trailers. So what happens, once that spent grain comes out of the mash tuns, they go into these trailers, farmers take them out, where they get fed to cows, and back into the system basically. So we're not putting it to landfill. Everything's getting recycled, so that's super important. So what we'll do now, we'll just go around to the front, and we'll finish off, and we'll have a quick chat with the guys around there. I think probably they're having a beer. I hope they're 2 meters apart. Any questions, Mo?
No.
So obviously this is the most important part, because this is the part where people actually get to sample our beers, and that was the most, that was the key point for us, is that we wanted to create not just a soulless production site where we just made beer and we were just a factory or a brewery. We wanted somewhere that people could come, see our process from start to finish through all the windows. Even when you're drinking in the bar, you can see in there, you can see the cans coming past, and it looks really cool. And you come back out here, where you can actually sample our products. Just a shame at the moment because the weather's so lovely that, yeah. I don't know who this guy is sitting here, but
enjoying an ice cold beverage.
So we're back where we started, and I hope you all enjoyed that, and we could take you through it from your living room or your kitchen, wherever you're sitting. We had to stop doing brewery tours. When did we stop them?
Mid-March.
Yeah. So obviously,
unfortunately, but yeah, we're going to get them back online as soon as we can, and we're currently now building a new back end for our brewery tour, sort of linked in with the online shop. So it should be a lot easier now to book tours if you want to jump on a tour, and hopefully we'll be back up and running so you can actually get the real thing. Come down, enjoy your day out on the patio. Have a beer in the sun.
Yeah. So just thanks to everybody. Thanks for your continued support. Hopefully we'll have something going on next week again, something a bit different. So we're looking at a homebrew sort of session where, if you're keen to start making your own beers. We used to do our own homebrew packs. We're hoping to bring them back online as well. But what we'll do next week, we'll do we'll run you through a homebrew. So we'll do a miniature version of the process that we talked about today. So we'll be able to mash in ourselves. We'll be able to boil, put our hops in. We'll be all, it'll be a bit sort of Blue Peter style when we created earlier, but we'll go through the whole process anyway. I'm hoping to get a Blue Peter badge off Ashley. He's promised me one. But we'll do that next week, and more information will be released in the next couple of days with that. But
yeah, that'll be just a bit of fun for everyone, and I guess a chance for you to get back on the homebrew kit, and if you want me there.
Yeah,
I'm not very good at that.
we will. So, yeah, thanks very much, everybody, and yeah, stay
Thanks,
safe.
everyone.
Yes, clap for the heroes.
Let's get up. 8 o'clock. Make sure you support the NHS.